So next up, we had an amazing keynote by Jose Fernandez last night. If you missed it, make sure to get the cliff notes from Jose, but you really missed a great keynote. Today, we have another amazing keynote ahead of us, and I get to introduce a good friend, Dr. Gary Hoover. Hoover is currently serving as the executive director at the Murphy Institute at Tulane University, where he also holds the position of professor of economics and affiliate professor of law. His research extends into various fields, including income distribution, poverty, public finance, and ethics in economics, and his work has helped shape our understanding of these critical areas. Hoover earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 1993, followed by a master's degree and a PhD from Washington University in St. Louis in 1995 and 1998, respectively. Hoover's commitment to advancing the profession and fostering inclusivity is evident through the numerous honors and achievements and affiliations that he holds. As a longstanding member of the American Economic Association Committee on the Status of Minority Groups in the Economics Profession, he has advocated for the diversity and equal opportunities in the profession. Additionally, he has played a significant role in the Southern Economic Association, serving as the vice president and president during different tenures. Dr. Hoover has served as the founding editor of the Journal of Economics, Race, and Policy, a platform that promotes rigorous and innovative scholarship on crucial economic and social issues. His contribution to academia have earned him prestigious recognition, such as the President's Association's Presidential Professorship at the University of Oklahoma. Please help me welcome Hoover to the stage. Thank you for being here, Hoover.
Hey, everybody. So first off, let me say that don't stop eating. And if you need to get up and go get some more, eggs are best when they're warm. So eating cold eggs isn't going to work out well for you. Almost everything I'm going to talk about, I'm fairly certain you're going to already know, but let me just try and put a finer point to it. When it comes to economics as a discipline, words that aren't normally associated with it are things like really inclusive, big tent. Those are not things that we think about. So let me just run through some numbers before I talk about what LT is. And you normally say, okay, look, here's the title. You said LT, you haven't even explained it yet. That'll come later. Let's talk a little bit about what we've got going. All right, Latinx doctorate recipients. The only thing really worth noticing here is that all fields does better than economics. And math and science does better in economics. If you were to go the right way, even scaled. And I want to put a finer point on this in that when it comes to economics, people choose pure math before they would choose economics, right? That should tell you something about where we stand. When we look about Black doctorate recipients, it's an even more stark difference. And that's going to matter because, as you'll see in one of the next slides, one of the main arguments is, well, this is just simply self-selection. And people who don't choose to go into economics, they just really don't have an interest in the more technical mathematical fields. Yet, pure math draws more people than economics. So that's just a red herring. The numbers speak for themselves in that we aren't doing a very good job. If you look across demographics, right, we're not keeping up with national trends, and we're falling behind other disciplines. right? Um, People come from diverse backgrounds to economics and they have questions and they say, look, I've got these questions already. Can economics help me find the answers? And typically what ends up happening is we tell people, no, that economics will not be a part of your discovery process. And then on top of that, we're rather surprised that people then go to other disciplines. We're like, wow, I don't really understand why people aren't really engaged in economics when they came to you and there wasn't much that you said that economics could add to their experiences. Asarda's more recent work, right? Chalk and talk. That's not going to grab folks, right? If it's going to just be chalk and talk, and more importantly, people want to know, Jose was talking about this yesterday, that the students today want to have a conversation about race and gender. They want to see themselves in those discussions. And when we don't put those into the discussions, we're really surprised that people then say, all right, well, if it's not going to be there, I will go and find some other discipline where it is. Look, everybody wants to see themselves, and one of the things that we do at the Committee for the Status of Minority Groups in the econ profession is we actually have profiles, and I would encourage you, you'll see this slide that comes up later. Sometimes high school students or even our college students say, how do I see myself fitting into this profession? Or even not even just this profession, using economics. We have a series of profiles. Jose is profiled, I'm profiled, that shows the entire life arc. How was it that as a high school student for me, I took an economics class and said, okay, this is what I like and this is what I want to do. We have about 50 of these profiles that you can point students to. That's going to be important because maybe your life arc isn't the one that the students will be interested in. So we have those for others. Let me tell you about what's going on here with this quote before I actually read the quote. One of the things that me and a couple of co-authors did was we did a survey of people in economics. But typically what you do when you're looking at minorities is you take those minorities who are in the economics profession and you ask them, how's it going? This survey was a bit different because not only does this survey include those who are in economics and asking them how you're doing, minorities, we found a bunch of minorities who were interested in economics, but then they left. And we asked them, you were interested in economics enough that you took some classes, you had some type of interest, but then you cut it off. And you left this as an area. Why? Here's some of the answers, right, that people said. Being able to connect what's happened in the classroom with what a given student's lived experience or question is extremely useful. I know there are a lot of people of color who I think personally, if economics was much more accessible, they would have, would be economists because they're interested in the questions of how do we fix these things, right? This is why this person who was a college graduate, this person said, I went into economics with questions and I left with those same questions. I went in concerned about racial disparities, and my professor told me, well, Becker solved all of that stuff. And so there's nothing left to be done in that area. And then we tell them, look, individuals maximize utility, firms maximize profit. There's no room in there for any types of discrimination. So if you're seeing it or you're imagining that you're seeing it, it's all in your mind. And so this student walked away. If that's going to be the case, and that's where economics lives, then I'm done. Here's what another student who went as far as the MA and then called it quits. I don't know. I guess maybe just being told that you can actually be an economist. Just simply is as simple as that, right? Being told you can do this. There's enough room in this field for you also, right? When was the last time that, we think about it. When was the last time you actually told someone, you can do this? This is just as much for me as it is for you. These are things that matter. So when people are walking away from economics, right? And I'm not just saying everyone's going to become an economist, but even using economics in their daily lives, why are they walking away? Well, here's some of the reasons. Here's another one. I wish I'd been part of a program that would have taught me how college was different from high school. I think that would have made my transition, my first semester, 1,000 times easier. I don't know how they quantify that, but 1,000 times easier. Look at this. This is what this person said. That if someone would have told them, this is what office hours are for. It's okay if the only thing you show up to the office hours with is, I literally understand nothing. Economists we haven't done that. So this person said, I'm going to graduate from college. And he or she did, but not using economics. So when I was in high school and I wanted to make that transition, I wish I had been told about this thing about office hours and going into office hours, and that office hours can be inviting. And there was another part of this quote that actually didn't make it, where this person says, and I don't have the exact quote, but it was something to the effect of, when I went to office hours and I went to the economists, they were the least accommodating, right? So I would go to office hours, and once this person figured out what office hours was, and economists were the least accommodating. And so this person graduated, sure enough, not using economics. Solutions. So we got a problem. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we can do to inform, mentor, and help, right? So basically from here on out, when I'm talking about informing, I'm not necessarily talking about informing the students. I'm talking about informing yourselves, right? I'm going to lay out some techniques and tools, of which I believe that you'll know all of these things, well, most of these things. And then you can use these. But out of our survey, here's what ended up being the 3 most important things for those who ended up leaving the profession. Now specifically here, what I'm talking about, when minorities left. They left the profession, or they left economics. I keep saying profession, but they left economics due to information, mentoring, and welcoming. Okay, LT stands for literacy targeted instruction. That's where the LT was when you saw that in the beginning. Jose mentioned this yesterday, that we're going to have a touch on about 40% of the students who come through university, right? 2% majoring. LT just says, what we're going to do is, instead of trying to go through the entire book, we're not going to go through the entire book. We're not going to go through the 20 to 25 chapters in the book. We're going to go through 15, 16, but we're going to take a deeper dive. Some of the work that was done by Donna Gillespie and colleagues showed this, that if you did literacy targeted learning, 2 things happen. Number 1, the students were competitive in the next level of education in economics. And you say, how in the world can a student who is in high school or a freshman in college, right, go on if they haven't learned PPP, right? The purchasing price parity. Well, you know what? They'll figure it out. Once you don't have to go over everything that's in the book, and they will be just as well informed at the next level. In addition to that, what they found was that when you did this LT approach, we had a much higher increase in women, and now we know this is also true for minorities who stick with economics. Remember, I was talking before, I went through all this stuff about what causes minorities to leave. Well, this is one of the things that causes minorities to stay, right here. If you do an LT approach, you will see a higher retention, a higher touch towards minorities who have an interest in economics. And they'll be competitive as they take more courses. Okay, let's try and go the right way. Okay. Because of that, because you're going to pare down, and this has been debated back and forth, but you're going to pare down the curriculum. You're not going to do all of the topics. This will give you a chance to talk about race and gender in the curriculum. And some of us have been debating whether or not it would be better to have an entire section, a chapter dedicated to race and gender disparities. Some of us argue that what you really want to do is integrate it throughout, right? As you're talking about this topic, talk about, hey, you know what? There's some disparities that happen along the line when we're talking about this. My suggestion is to just do it. I really don't care if you do it at the front. I don't care if you do it in the middle. Just please be willing to integrate it into the classroom discussion, right? Because it's going to fit. If you have a whole chapter dedicated to it, fine. If you want to take it piece by piece, fine. But now you've got the room to do it, right? You've got the breadth of time because you've pared down the topics. You're going to take a deeper dive. I think the second point is the point that is probably more important, is that some instructors, whether it's high school, or at the university level, want to have that traditional lecture format. And you can do that still with LT. You can start out with that traditional lecture format, and then at the end, open it up to try and do some other principles that will let you do a deeper dive. That's sort of the beauty of having fewer topics. What we've seen is that in order to get through the entire chapter, to get a quiz in, to prepare for the exam, and then to get on to the next one, there's not much room left for anything other than this type of just straight lecture. But you can still have your lecture with the fewer topics, and at the end of that, have a chance to engage the students in the types of things that they're going to come to you with questions about. Because one of the questions that I get in the classroom is quite simply this: what does economics say about blank? And if our answer is nothing, then don't be surprised if they go to someplace else to find an answer, because that's the question they have. And they're coming to you and they're saying, what does economics have to say? Because I've heard what this class has to say, and this class has to say, but I sort of like economics. I would like to see that in the framework. And then we say, we don't have much to say. You can still have your lecture and still have an opportunity to instruct. Here's some of the applications that came up. And I'm pretty sure that you sound some of this. Lisa Cook's work about black sounding names. right? What's interesting is with some of this work that I've integrated into some of my instruction is that we don't even get to skills, right? And so we can talk about these skill disparities, and this is where I normally put this stuff in, where we talk about, well, look, there's going to be these educational and these skill disparities, but the sound of your name has absolutely no bearing on your skill set. So that maybe the problem isn't these disparities in skill sets, the pool that you're comparing has already been biased. That's how we introduce the topic into the classroom discussion, right? To say, yeah, maybe by the time we're looking at the finalist, there's this disparity because this group had already been excluded before we ever got to that step just by the sounds of their names. Same thing that happens when I talk about race and income distribution, right? We spend a lot of time when we can talk about some stuff around stratification economics. Basically, that the median for the distribution of Black incomes goes to the 32nd percentile of white incomes, right? And that's how you introduce the topic with still being able to cover all of the needed material. And I assure you that once you do this, this will draw the interest of others. I like the one in the middle. Remember I told you about this response and some of the things that the folks said, and you can read some of the other stuff. But look at this one. The student said, this wasn't from us, this is what one of the respondents said. If you're going to discuss Uber, then why don't you also do the problems that Black women face in calling Uber? I don't know what else to say other than yes, that absolutely seems to be a perfect segue into it. And look at this quote right here from someone who ended up she ended up doing economics, but another respondent reported that it was not until she had graduated and read about Rod Shetty's research in the New York Times that she realized, oh, economists do this? Economists take race into account? What this told me was this was a person who majored in econ. The entire curriculum had not one mention of race or gender, in that this person took, how many classes do we take to get a bachelor's degree in econ? And it was never mentioned once. And she had to read it in the newspaper. She had to read in the newspaper that economists actually recognize that race is a factor. That's a failing on our part. That's a failing that we could have handled had we talked a little bit more using an LT principle. Some of the games, Prisoner's Dilemma, modified public goods games, where in the classroom, because now you have more time to do these types of things, what you can do, and let me go to one of the better games, which is mine. Okay, so I just skipped over. Right, so the other ones, these are cool, yeah, they're okay. This one's better. So, no, that's not true. So here's all that I did in this experiment, and then I actually ran this in class. I gave students a task to do, and the task allowed them to earn points. When the task was blinded, everyone put forth effort. But then what I did was the same effort did not give out the same results, in that some people, no matter how hard they tried, they were never going to be able to catch some of the other students. Now, their efforts would have made them better off than where they were, but they were never going to catch the other students. When you did this blinded, Everyone put forth effort. But then I let them know that where everyone stood, that some of your neighbors next to you are going to put in just as much effort for you than you did, and you're going to put in all this effort, and then you're never going to catch them, right? No matter how hard you work, they're going to work hard, you're going to work hard, and even though you worked hard, you're going to be better off than you were. You're not going to catch your neighbor. The results of the paper showed that once I saw that, they quit. They gave up. And so once you put this into the context, so I do this in class. I do the same thing in class where students, and then you watch the quit rate and you watch who gives up. It's those who said, yes, I'm going to be better off. So then our theory says, economics tells us, oh no, everyone will do that because they're going to be better off than they were at the start, right? So of course, everyone's just going to give maximum effort. But then, once they realize that their best efforts were never going to catch the students next to them, mixed in the class, and they gave up, I said, okay, now let's take that and let's take that into talk about real world scenarios about conspicuous consumption and some of the behavior that we see. Is it possible that watching your best efforts never be enough might have induced some to give up, even though economic theory says no one would ever do that? Talking about these things in class worked, and it spurred interest in both the minority students and actually, not just everyone. Everyone took to heart these types of discussions. And I think that that's what I'm trying to get at here with some of these experiments. Here, the second quote here is what I really want to try and press, especially if I'm looking around this room now. Sometimes instructors shy away from this discussion, right? Race and gender, they shy away from it, fearful that a student or the instructor themselves may say something. In a class discussion, the instructor is always as much student as a teacher. If you're waiting, and this has happened to me before, to where my colleagues have said, I am not the one to talk about race in my class. If you want that, you got to go down and take the class from Hoove. But here's the problem. It is possible, and given the numbers, it is likely that students will go through their entire college curriculum and never have been instructed by a minority instructor. Therefore, if you're waiting on your minority colleagues to be the ones to champion this cause, we're not going to make it. If you're thinking about this in terms of economics, the numbers are even worse than college overall. The average, actually more than the average, right? And you can look these numbers up at the Committee for the Status of Minority Groups in the Economics Profession, right? The probability that a student majoring in economics is going to have a minority professor is about 2%. That means that the rest of us have to be willing to pick up the slack. Look at this room. Look at this room. Look at me. If you're waiting for the discussion to come up with my teaching, as opposed to all of us taking an affirmative role in this regard, we're not going to make it. And part of the problem is that you only want to teach those things that you are comfortable with, right? So what I'm trying to do is help you with tools that will give you the comfort level to take on these topics. They matter. That's all we have to do if we want to see the numbers increased. We use this LT approach. These types of things help us to increase the numbers of people who stay engaged. I don't have to say much about podcasts. I actually saw that we've got several great discussions we've had and will have more great discussions about using podcasts to help out. They work. If you're thinking about minority participation and increasing engagement, podcasts are a great way to include. More on podcasts. The Minneapolis Fed has a bunch of podcasts. There's actually, I don't know if you've seen this, I'll make these slides available if anyone cares, that there's a website dedicated to the economics and Broadway musical hit songs. That I did not know, right? So there are a bunch of different ways, 10 best films teaching economics. Only thing I'm saying is that we're going to just try to meet folks where they are. LT Principles gives us the opportunity to meet folks where they are, and it does make a difference. Look at this, look at the quote below, right? I lacked concrete information on what my career prospects would be beyond academia. I didn't even know until recently that I could have worked for the Federal Reserve. This was from an underrepresented minority who actually ended up getting a BA in economics. If we're going to talk to folks, we have to say more than economics is really great. We have to be able to say economics is really great, and then here's what you can do with it. But you can't tell others what they can do with economics if you don't know what they can do with economics. So to the point that, especially for our minority and to try and bring some more gender equity, we have to be able to tell people practical information on what they're going to be able to do with economics, and that is absolutely possible with this LT approach. These links here are the types of things I was telling you about, the Committee on the Status of Minority Groups in the Econ Profession. We've got videos, we've got profiles, we've got career paths, not just academics, and not just for people with advanced degrees, with BA degrees. We've got a new committee, the Committee on the Status of LGBTQ+ individuals. The same type of things if we're going to be more inclusive. You're absolutely not going to have a discussion if it is allowed in your state to do so, right? You're not going to have this discussion about LGBTQ+ issues. And if you're not comfortable, if you want to gain information for yourself to inform yourself, I would suggest that you reach out and look there. We got a chance to touch 40%. LT could help. What I do know is LT works. If we want to make these students more competitive, our minority students, and if we want to increase the numbers of minority students, LT does both. So finally, and here's the thing I'm going to say that's going to be revolutionary. You've never heard it before. I'm the first one to ever say it. Economics and economists, you need to use economics. Yeah, that's my revolutionary statement, that economists should actually use economics. And that if we see that this is a problem, right, what we know is that incentives matter, right? I wonder about what incentives have ever been put in place to increase the numbers of minorities in doing economics and having an impact of economics. By what do I mean by that, right? So at least at the university level, you want folks to do some amount of research, right? And so what do? You put incentives in place so that they will do the amount of research you're looking for. You want people to do some quality of teaching, measured, as Jose talked about last night, using teaching evaluations or whatever. You do that because you're looking for a certain metric, right? But when it comes to the quantity of minorities in using and being touched by economics, we have a diversity statement. That doesn't seem to me to align with using economics to solve a problem in economics. So what I'm telling you here is, here's how we can align our incentives with our problem and have more people, a more diverse and a more inclusive economics world, people being touched by, people having economic engagement. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a great keynote. We do have a little bit of time for questions. Who's interested? All right, see a quick hand up here.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful talk. I'm very excited to hear somebody actually talk about incentives to help us with this big issue. And what you talked about is quality teaching and mentoring, which is typically, mentoring in particular is only a service part of our jobs, right? But it is the quality mentoring and one-on-one relationships that we develop with the students that actually make a difference in their lives. So I feel like trying to solve the incentives at the individual or instructor level is not necessarily the most efficient way to go about it. What can we do as a profession to change that structure of incentives for all of us?
Well, here's the issue, right? If we believe that economics says that I am going to be motivated to help, if I'm thinking about at the profession level, what happens when the profession is seen as not being necessary? That's the problem I see when people come to me as an instructor and they ask, hey, what does economics have to say about this or that? Economics has nothing to say. Those students go on to a different discipline, and then that becomes the discipline that policymakers and everyone else and administrators go to for answers. Then we've just worked ourselves out of a job. That's the profession-wide incentive. Do you want to have an econ profession?
We have a question over here.
Thanks. Should I stand? I guess I should stand. So is there a type of literature that we've seen has been more effective, more impactful? Like, is it better to do more of a narrative style, maybe chunks from books, or is it better to have, hey, here's some research on this topic, and let's kind of do a lit review on, maybe a selection of authors that have done, So I guess is it maybe a combination? Maybe there's no answer. What have you had success with when doing it, I guess?
I've let it be student-driven. Students come to me they say, I just had this happen to me, right? So they've got these lived experiences. I tried to get a summer internship and all of my peers were selected and I wasn't, right? That's when typically economists are going to say, well, with that one data point, we can't draw any conclusions, and so therefore I have nothing to say. If that's going to be your answer, then we've lost from the start. That's actually our starting point to say, okay, let's analyze this issue, and then you can look for the literature that supports it. So I let the students with their lived experiences begin the discussion, and then that directs me to where I want to go. Makes sense? Yep.
Hello. So I really like this idea of literacy-targeted instruction, specifically paring down. How did you start that conversation with your colleagues in your department? Or maybe your institution is different from mine, but as an introductory instructor teaching principles, we're sort of given a list, a very ambitious list of topics that we're expected to cover so that when they move on, to the upper levels, it's been done. So how did you start that conversation saying, okay, I am going to get rid of these 5 things, but don't panic. People later down the road, they'll be prepared in other ways. So how did you pare down?
I used the data, right? So I went to Donna's paper. I went to the papers that have been done and said, look at what we've got. These students are just as well prepared with the pared down curriculum, and it is a more diverse pool that we have moving along. Now, instead of me making the case, I want you to make the case against, right? Look, the data's already shown that this works. So if all you have is your opinion, some tingly feelings on the back of your neck or some ideas, and I've got data, then clearly you're just showing your bias, right? Otherwise than that, that's all I did, right? You take the data, you say, okay, here's the research. Now you show me the research that proves that this outdated, chalk and talk method is the way to go.
Did you get any voiced concerns from colleagues where they're like, oh, you're cutting my thing? I need you to bring that back in.
Yeah.
How did you how did you deal with how did you have that conversation following, other than just there's the data, don't worry? Or did you just say, there's data, don't worry?
No, I didn't say the don't worry part, right? Once again, right? Here's what I have. What do you have other than that's what, you want to believe this to be true. And it wasn't, and it still hasn't proven to be true. LT works. Show me the research that shows what you do works better, and I'll do that, right? And you just said, I want to be more inclusive. I want a more diverse student body and people engaged in econ. I'm telling you that you get the same quality of instruction later on, and you get the diversity that you said you wanted. So one of the two of us is lying, right? Either you really don't care about the diversity and just come on out and say it, or there's something else going on here, because I can get you both with this approach. Do you really just want the one? Then just say it. And then I'll go somewhere else.
We have another question.
Quick question about the podcast. Do you think it's about the format of the podcast or the topic selection? Any kind of feedback or insights into how we can think about content and it being more engaging, specifically on the podcast topic versus format?
What I found is that the podcasts cover topics that students want to engage in, right? And podcasts, as opposed to maybe something in a textbook, can be up to date, and because that's what the students at least the engagement I've had from the minority students that I've been able to touch is that they're like, look, you know, these things are talking about areas that are closer to my lived experiences. And what also, but let me also add this, right? The students can find the economics in the topic, right? That's the interesting thing when you go to this approach. You give them the podcast and you say, where's the economics in this, right? Here's a podcast on bike racing. But on the surface, you might say, okay, that was pretty interesting. That was just about bikes, right? But then if you ask them, where was the economics in this discussion? That's the hook. That's what draws them in, is that now that they've engaged in it in a way that they find appealing, they'll find the economics. And that's how you get them hooked, and that's how we keep them engaged.
Perfect. Another round of applause for Hoot, please. Thank you. Fantastic. A little something from the Hale College business. Thank you.